Have you ever wondered what it would take for the oppressed to rise up against an empire? In the heart of 18th century Jamaica, a revolt erupted that shook the very foundations of colonial power. Tacky's revolt was not just a rebellion, it was a bold statement of courage, leadership, and the unbreakable human spirit. Over several months in 1760, enslaved Africans united under a powerful leader to challenge one of the most brutal systems of slavery in the world. Led by Tacky, an Akan chief from West Africa, this uprising spread through plantations in St. Mary Parish and forced the British to respond with force and strategy. Today, we'll uncover the story of Tacky's revolt, exploring its causes, key events, and lasting legacy, a story of resistance that continues to inspire even centuries later. Before we proceed, let's recap the history of slavery in Jamaica. By the mid-1700s, Jamaica had become one of Britain's wealthiest colonies, built on the backbreaking labor of enslaved Africans who worked on sprawling sugar plantations. From sunrise to sunset, men, women, and even children labored under the scorching sun, their bodies scarred by whippings, beatings, and cruel punishments for even the slightest mistake. Food was scarce, clothing tattered, and every day was a struggle for survival. Imagine mothers separated from their children, husbands torn from wives, families destroyed without warning. This was the daily reality for thousands. Fear and oppression were constant companions, shaping lives filled with hardship, despair, and yet unbroken hope. African heritage of enslaved people. Despite the relentless suffering, the enslaved Africans carried their rich cultural heritage across the Atlantic. Many were from the Akan people of West Africa, bringing with them traditions of leadership, spiritual practices, and military knowledge. These cultural threads wove resilience into the hearts of the enslaved, fostering a sense of unity and community. It was this heritage that allowed leaders like Tacky to emerge, men who could inspire, strategize, and organize a rebellion that challenged the very foundations of colonial power. Their African roots were not lost. They were the source of strength, courage, and vision that fueled resistance. Previous resistance, acts of defiance, had long simmered in Jamaica. Enslaved people resisted through small but meaningful actions, slowing work, sabotaging equipment, or attempting daring escapes into the mountains. Beyond these subtle forms of resistance, maroon communities, escaped enslaved Africans living freely in the hills, actively defied British authority. They were living proof that freedom was possible and served as powerful symbols of hope for those still in bondage. These small resistances, both hidden and overt, created a blueprint and inspiration for what would become Tacky's full-scale revolt, a bold, organized fight for liberty that would shake the colony to its core. If this story of courage and resistance moves you, take a moment to like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next chapter of history that challenges everything you thought you knew. Now let's continue with the causes of the revolt. Harsh treatment and exploitation. The immediate spark for Tacky's revolt was the relentless cruelty of plantation life. Enslaved Africans were forced to work from dawn until dusk under the scorching Caribbean sun, often on dangerous sugarcane fields where one mistake could mean injury or death. Food was meager, clothing tattered, and punishments merciless. Whippings, beatings, and even mutilation were common tools of control. For many, the pain was not just physical, but deeply emotional. Mothers were torn from their children, husbands from wives, and families were shattered without warning. Imagine a young boy, barely 10, witnessing his mother flogged for dropping a bundle of cane. This daily terror forged a simmering anger and deep yearning for freedom. It was this unbearable suffering that transformed despair into determination, pushing enslaved Africans to take bold action against the system that had stolen their humanity. If this story of courage and resistance moves you, take a moment to like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next chapter of history that challenges everything you thought you knew. Influence of African leaders. Tacky was more than just a man. He was a natural leader with the wisdom and experience of an Akan chief from West Africa. He carried with him not only the knowledge of military strategy, but also the spiritual and cultural authority to unite others. For the enslaved, Tacky represented hope, a living reminder that freedom was not an impossible dream. His presence gave structure to their resistance, proving that African leadership and tactical skill could challenge even the most entrenched colonial powers. Under his guidance, ordinary enslaved people became a formidable force bound together by a shared vision of liberation and justice. Inspiration from previous revolts. Even in the shadows of oppression, enslaved Africans found strength in the stories of resistance from elsewhere in the Caribbean and the Americas. Tales of rebellions that had briefly shaken colonial authority, though ultimately suppressed, offered lessons in strategy, courage, and persistence. These stories were more than history. They were lifelines of hope. They whispered that rebellion was possible, that a better life could be fought for, and that the chains of slavery were not eternal. Tacky and his followers drew inspiration from these narratives, using them to plan their revolt with precision, unity, and a burning sense of purpose. Opportunity, timing as much as courage, played a pivotal role in Tacky's revolt. Britain was deeply embroiled in the 7 Years' War, a global conflict that diverted military attention and resources away from the Caribbean. Colonial militias were stretched thin, and planters could not afford to deploy enough forces to suppress potential uprisings. This moment of vulnerability gave Tacky and the rebels a critical window to act. They seized it with urgency and determination, knowing that every hour they delayed was another opportunity lost. In that fleeting chance, the enslaved saw the possibility of turning years of suffering into a fight for freedom that could not be ignored. Here are the major key events of the revolt. Outbreak of the rebellion. In April 1760, Tacky and his followers launched a daring attack on the Gold Coast plantation, striking fear into the heart of colonial Jamaica. The overseer, a symbol of cruelty and control, was killed and weapons were seized from the estate. Machetes, farming tools, and even captured firearms became instruments of resistance in the hands of those who had been denied their freedom for so long. The courage it took to strike against their oppressors cannot be overstated. These were men and women risking death for a dream of liberation. News of the attack spread rapidly, inspiring more enslaved people to join the rebellion, each driven by their own personal stories of pain, loss, and unbroken hope. Spread, the rebellion did not remain confined to a single plantation. Within weeks, it spread beyond St. Mary Parish, engulfing neighboring estates as hundreds of enslaved Africans joined Tacky's cause. They were united by the dream of freedom, the shared suffering under a merciless system, and the belief that their collective action could change their destinies. The momentum of the revolt revealed the extraordinary power of unity among the oppressed and made it clear that this was no spontaneous outburst of anger. It was a carefully orchestrated fight for liberation that shook the colonial authorities to their core. British response. The British colonial authorities reacted with urgency, deploying militias to quell the uprising. They also called on the Maroons from Charlestown and Moortown, skilled warriors who were familiar with the local terrain and had long resisted colonial authority themselves. The ensuing battles were fierce and bloody. The rebels, armed mostly with machetes and farming tools, confronted trained soldiers and mounted militias, demonstrating immense bravery and resolve. Each confrontation highlighted the stark contrast between the enslaved people's desperate desire for freedom and the colonial determination to maintain control. Tacky's death. In May 1760, the rebels suffered a devastating blow. Tacky himself was killed in combat. His death struck at the heart of the rebellion, shattering morale and disrupting the careful organization he had built. Yet, even in the face of this loss, the courage of the remaining rebels did not vanish entirely. Many continued to resist, fleeing to the hills or fighting in small bands, their determination fueled by the memory of Tacky's leadership and the ideals he represented. Aftermath of the revolt. Although the uprising was ultimately suppressed, its impact endured. Many participants were captured and executed, leaving behind a legacy of pain and loss. Yet, the revolt also sent a message of defiance and hope. Even in the face of overwhelming oppression, enslaved Africans could organize, resist, and fight for freedom. Tacky became more than a leader. He became a symbol of courage, resilience, and the unyielding human spirit, inspiring future generations to dream of liberation and justice. The consequences of the revolt are both short-term and long-term. Short-term, in the immediate aftermath of the revolt, the planters acted with ruthless efficiency. Punishments became more severe. Plantations were tightly monitored, and militia patrols increased to prevent any future uprisings. Fear rippled through the enslaved population as families were torn apart and leaders hunted relentlessly. Yet, even under this terror, the seeds of resistance had been planted. The story of Tacky's courage and the brief taste of freedom he and his followers fought for lingered in the hearts of those still in bondage, a reminder that defiance was possible even in the face of overwhelming power. Long-term, Tacky's revolt left a lasting imprint on the psyche of both the enslaved and the colonial authorities. Among the enslaved, it became a source of inspiration, a story passed down of bravery, leadership, and the fight for justice. For the British, it underscored the constant threat of rebellion, leading to increased reliance on Maroons for policing and the creation of stricter controls over enslaved populations. The revolt also contributed to a growing awareness throughout the Caribbean that enslaved people were not passive laborers. They were human beings, capable of strategy, courage, and the relentless pursuit of freedom. Historical legacy. Tacky's name and story endured long after his death. He became a symbol of resistance, courage, and hope, a figure whose bravery challenged centuries of oppression. His revolt proved that organized resistance among enslaved Africans was not only possible, but profoundly powerful. In the centuries that followed, Tacky's rebellion inspired future uprisings, serving as a testament to the unbreakable human spirit and the universal longing for liberty. It remains a vivid reminder that freedom is worth fighting for, no matter the odds. Tacky's revolt would have major significance in world history. Tacky's revolt was not merely a local event, it was a pivotal moment in the history of resistance against slavery in the Atlantic world. It exposed the vulnerabilities of the plantation system and demonstrated that enslaved Africans could challenge colonial power with planning, unity, and courage. The revolt highlighted the strategic and leadership capabilities of African people, challenging contemporary notions that enslaved populations were passive or incapable of organized resistance. Beyond Jamaica, the uprising became part of the larger narrative of defiance against slavery. It inspired other rebellions throughout the Caribbean and the Americas, reinforcing the idea that oppression could be confronted and freedom could be fought for. Tacky's courage and vision resonated across generations, reminding the world that even in the darkest moments, human beings have the capacity to rise, to resist, and to reclaim their dignity. His legacy is a powerful testament to the enduring fight for justice and liberty, a story that continues to inspire all who yearn for freedom and equality. Tacky's revolt reminds us that even in the face of unimaginable suffering, courage and unity can ignite change. The story of Tacky and his followers is not just a historical event. It's a timeless lesson about resilience, hope, and the power of standing up against injustice. If this story inspired you, make sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss more incredible stories from history. Share your thoughts in the comments. What other tales of courage and resistance do you want us to explore? And remember, history is more than dates and battles. It's the stories of people who refuse to give up, just like Tacky.